Greetings and welcome to Passion to Profit Podcast COVID 19 CARES Act 2020 episode season 2, where we provide you with local, state, federal, and global news, updates, resources, and tips. Everything that you need to know and how to act accordingly. This is your host, Teresa W. Gamble of CRPC Consulting and ENT Gamble Enterprises LLC, where we are an award winning administrative management consulting firm where we provide strategic coaching, consulting, connection, and communication skills to help you create or repair current systems and processes to create your multiple sustainable revenue streams. Today, I want to talk about a newsletter that I read from Brian Hamilton. He was an opinion contributor of the USA Today about former felons should not be pushed out of the loans under the CARES Act. And it states that several days ago he talked to Scott Jennings, one of his board members of Inmates, the entrepreneurs, who was fired up after reading the recent Small Business Administration and Business Loan application. He served time in prison years ago, and he's now a highly successful entrepreneur. Like many entrepreneurs, has worked very hard to start a new life, and his business has been significantly impacted by the new coronavirus, by the application but the application for the small business loan meant to keep small businesses afloat discriminates against previous felons. I wanted to talk about this podcast because it made me, my mind went back to when we were going through the impeachment hearings with our current president that is in office, of how of the criminal activity, the white collar criminal activity he was engaged in. And when they were developing the CARES Act, the congressmen and women and even the speaker of the house was real stringent and specific to make sure that any person that had any type of criminal background activity, whether they was charged or not or accused or not, would not be able to capitalize on this funding that was going out. They wanted to make sure that the people who really needed it have it. And when I read this article, it made me thought about that. So he goes on to say, despite the strides in criminal justice reform, finding a job is still one of the hardest challenges for formerly incarcerated individuals. And the CARES Act was supposed to provide relief for all small business owners, including former felons, shouldn't make staying alive during this time of lockdowns, the potential layoffs, harder as well. It's already hard enough. So he looked at the polling in the USA, look at race, justice, and media, for instance. The act includes a provision to make $350 billion in loans available to small businesses through the SBA, that is the Small Business Administration. The loans was meant to help businesses like Scott Jennings and his employees. In the application, there are two questions that will immediately disqualify him. The first one is the applicant or the individual or owner own 20% or more of the equity of the company. So that means a felon could not own 20, they could not have 100% ownership of their company. That'll automatically exclude them out the gate. And then the second question was within the last 5 years. So they put a time frame on it that if they go back 5 years from the date of your application to determine whether you've been convicted, you pleaded guilty, plead no contendere, which means a plea in a criminal prosecution that's without admitting guilt, been placed on pretrial, diversion, or have been placed on any type of form of parole or probation, including probation before judgment. So that's another strike that prevents any form of felons who are successful in business, because it's hard to obtain a job due to individuals unable to get through the background checks that many employers are requiring. Then another phase of the article, Brian Hamilton talks about dealing with DACA. That a nurse was battling against COVID-19, but DACA FICA in her deportation. So this is somebody that's on the front line, that's an immigrant, but because of DACA, this person may be deported because of it. While it's true that it is similar to the language that existed before the pandemic, it calls into question the fairness of the questions themselves and whether it is right to exclude people from relief who are formally judicially involved. In other words, have a criminal background, not a legal citizen. These are things that we need to take into account. In the worst case, these questions will lead to discrimination against judicially involved people. In the best case, which is more subtle and probable, more important and prevalent, the language here would discourage many people with criminal records from even applying. And because of this discouragement, it will cause the increase in unemployment, the increase of homelessness, the increase of people living in hotels, the increase of people resulting to stealing and doing illegal activities and gambling to stay afloat because the governmental system that they work for, pay taxes into, does not support them. So Brian Hamilton talks about a discussion that him and Scott had about the application, and he admitted that he wasn't a model citizen and he did committed a crime. He served time for 3 years and he had changed every aspect of his life and his role in society. So when a person has realized that they did something wrong, they paid their time, they totally did a 365 turnaround. Why is it that your past still determines whether or not you're eligible for a second chance? Eligible for a second chance. Why does your past determine in your presence or your future whether you're eligible for a second chance when you're no longer the person that you were before? Just a thought I want to leave with you. But in closing, Brian Hamilton says that most people agree that if people commit a crime, they should be required to give something back to society. They should be punished. But people shouldn't serve perpetual sentences via a stigma or discrimination that basically regulates them to a life sentence, even for minor crimes. So I hope this podcast today will help you put some things in perspective, how the playing field is not even, and people past should not determine how you should support them, patronize them, or help them in the future. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a journey. Everyone is striving to do things different in this country. Let's not be a part of the problem. Let's be a part of the solution. This is Teresa Gamble, your host for Passion and Profit Podcast, COVID 19 CARES Act 2020 episodes, where we provide you with local, state, federal, and global news updates, resources, and tips you need to know and how to act accordingly. We hope that you continue to listen and subscribe to this podcast and do share with others. And let's support former felons who are in business to get their right to keep being in business. If you want to learn more about Brian Hamilton, he is the executive founder of the Inmates to Entrepreneurs that's in Charlotte, North Carolina. To stay connected with CRPC Consulting, visit www.crpcconsultingllc.com. Thank you for listening and have a good day, and we'll see you on the next episode.